Important things I always like to stress there is that I didn't see journalism and data journalism as sort of separated things. Data journalism is just journalism using another range of tools, right? Using additional tools, which is I can use data sets as a source instead of just relying on press releases or going in, asking and talking to people and doing interviews. I can also use data as a source. And so I think it's much more about sort of the integration that will happen. That it will happen in the next 2 years as the people who are very interested in it now start doing more and more data stories. So for the success, it's the question what you define as success, right? For impact, it's necessary that if you write an article, think about what you actually want it to do, right? So I work with both journalists and civil society organizations. And with civil society organizations, we focus much more on this, saying what is the impact you want to have, what is the change you want to see, and then think about what do you need to know, what do you need others to know for this change to happen, right? Do you need them to understand a certain relationship? And if yes, how can you share this relationship? How can you research this relationship? I think for journalistic stories, things that are very interesting that come out of open data is very often how money is treated, how taxes are treated by the government, how contracts are given away, how business relations are formed. Things like this are very, very interesting because there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world. And things like airports are being built in the middle of nowhere and then no one wants to go there. Or big contracts are given to friends of friends or given to the one company that lobbies best, etc. So I think this is a very interesting field for journalists in open data. Unfortunately, most of it is not open data yet, right? So open data only goes that far because open data actually relies on the government's willingness to release it, right? It's sort of a voluntary act. And for one thing I see as very important is the interplay between open data programs and Freedom of Information Acts. So the right for you as a citizen to know what your government is up to, the right to get information out of your government. That's a very, very crucial piece that accompanies open data, right? Because at one point, if they get too many requests to release, they realize that it's easier to release data as open data instead of waiting for requests. Right? Media always has been a technology business. If you think back what we connect to media, it was always technology, right? If technology is everything we fabricate with our hands, right? Media initially relied on having something like paper or having something like a method to record sound or transmit sound. So it always has been, in a way, a technology business. Of course, if you ask me this question, you want to know whether it's become sort of a IT business, sort of a information technology business. And yes, it has, because it's the newest technology available, and media will always sort of adapt to this. Yes, because a lot of business models in modern technology are not clear yet. If you think of a lot of technology startups, they don't have a clear business model either, right? Think of something like Instagram, which is a fantastic thing. It doesn't have a clear business model. How do they make money of people posting pictures with their cell phones? I don't know, right? Their business model was to be bought by Facebook, right? So, who then has a different business model, which is selling users' data. But for a lot of new technology things, we need to figure out how to make money of it and whether or not we can at all. And I think this is this is what traditional media right now struggles with. You had for example, newspapers had a business model that worked quite well. They sold paper, and they kept up delivery networks selling paper every day. And because the paper was outdated every day, everyone needed to buy it again, and then you have the wonderful business model. And then on the other side, they sold advertising in the paper, which made a majority, for some newspapers, a majority of their income. If you think about that, for example, in the United States, you can buy Vanity Fair, which is actually quite decent journalism. You're laughing, but it's true. Vanity Fair is quite decent journalism, hidden among pages and pages of ads for expensive clothes and perfume and makeup and whatever. And they sell this for $1 a copy. This is not the price that costs to produce one copy of the Vanity Fair. They only can do so because they have advertising clients. And their business model is actually a genius one, right? They have advertising clients that are very little related to the content they report on. So the best reports I found in the US about, for example, the financial crisis and what happened in banks were done in the Vanity Fair, simply because their advertising business was not affected by their reporting, right? So advertising was always sort of a big thing, and it seems to be the way that many media outlets try to do this in the digital world. But in the digital world, it's much easier for me as a user to not look at the advertising, right? I have my browser set up so it doesn't show advertising. Every time I disable this, I'm so surprised how much advertising there is on pages, but usually I don't see it, right? I don't need to flip the pages and then find the article to read. Because the technology just makes the pages go away. I think paywalls have another problem, right? Usually, if you write an article, if you do an investigation, you want to have a wide reach, right? You want to have an impact. The problem with paywalls is that they usually limit the audience you can have, right? So there's a balance between making money of it and reaching the biggest possible audience. And you've seen this in the past, that media outlets who play with paywalls and experiment with paywalls, for important stories, they don't have them paywalled. If they break an important story in a big story, they want as many people as possible to read it. So they apply this selectively, and if you think about this logically then, they only apply the paywall to articles you don't want to read anyway. Right? So where's the incentive for me as a user to subscribe to them? So this is one of the problems. The other problem is that I come from sort of a culture and a group of people who believe that information should be openly accessible. If you put paywalls in the mean, you're sort of hindering this process. But this is something I think that will play out, and I think there will always be sort of subscription-based, paywall-based models of doing certain things. We've seen this in media, but we've also seen this with blogs, with amateurs who say, "Okay, I write this for you, and I create a subscription-based model to my blog or to my newsletter." I think treatment differs in a way that as a civil society organization or an activist group, you want to make a difference. You already have an agenda. You want to make a difference, and you want to be able to communicate this as good as possible. And you want to be able to say, we need this change, and we need it because this and this and this happens. So you want to you already start with an issue, you already start with an agenda, and you want to provide evidence that A, this is an important issue, and B, that what you're proposing is actually helping. And this is sort of the main target in civil society organizations. You really want to create a body of evidence that you're not just hitting on this issue because you're happy about it, but because this is really an important and fundamental piece. And what we often see in the response from decision makers is, oh yeah, this is, for example, not an issue. Right? We don't think this is an issue. And then you have to demonstrate to them that this is actually the case, that this is actually important, and this affects this many people, and this affects them in this way. Right? And this can be very well done through collecting data or using data that's there to show what's going on, and to visualize relationships, and to visualize structures and things like this. With journalists, we focus much more on telling a story, and investigating things and telling a story. So discovering things that were previously hidden and taking them into context. Finding interesting pieces inside data. There's interesting stories in many data sets. There's interesting stories that are just hidden there, and they're very, very hard to see if you just look at the numbers. But if you treat it right, if you bring it out and find it, visualize it, put it into context, there's actually an interesting story there. And with journalists, we focus much more on this. So it's a slightly different way of looking at the same problem or at the same thing.